What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are excited, ecstatic to record the podcast we thought we were going to record last week when we just bounce around, talk about some of the teams and players we're thinking about most these days. James Harden got traded last week, though, and so we had to audible. That won't be happening this week. Before we get started, the usual reminder, though, please, if you haven't already, hit that sub button on YouTube, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify. They help us out a ton. They can move us up the charts. If you've done all those things, the two things that you can also do to support the show, buy our merch, check out our merch. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. And the biggest thing, recommend us. Promote our stuff on Twitter. If you quote tweet it, retweet it when you see it. You can share it with friends, family members, acquaintances, random people on the street or on the internet or coworkers. All that stuff goes a long way. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube description as well. And follow us on all the socials. The links to those are in the podcast and YouTube description. We have Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, of course, if you're watching this. Share our shorts as well. Really help us juice up those numbers. Comment on the videos. I won't respond to everyone, but that's for the algo. So do it for the algo. Grant, how the heck are you?
I am reclined a little bit, as you can see, because this is an unusual recording time for us. It's almost 9 p.m. my time. So you got like 8 minutes before I literally fall asleep. So any long pauses, like just if you have like a whistle you could blow or something to make sure I'm not all the way unconscious, that'd be great. So
I'll play the
ready
stat padding intro every time I see you dozing.
Do it. I'm ready to forget words. I've already done that a little bit in our pre-taping conversation. So yeah, this will be good. But I am excited because I was hoping we would get to do this last week, just to have sort of a general, like, what are you paying attention to conversation. And we could not. But nobody got traded today. Or late last night, I guess.
There's still a couple minutes left in the day for me. Don't say that just yet.
That's true. Yeah. Well, it will pivot hard immediately.
Karl-Anthony Towns, you are a Chicago Bull.
you almost like got me right into one of my bounce around thoughts, but we won't do that quite yet. I would, you want to go first? Do you want to, I don't know if this needs an intro. We're just going to jump. Oh, you want to do the injury thing first?
Yeah. So we're going to try, it won't be every podcast, but we're going to try and just kind of bounce around and update the, all the injuries and happenings and returns and whatever that are noteworthy to us around the league. So we'll alternate here. I'll start. The Nets, Cam Johnson is dealing with a left calf bruise since the first game of the season. He's finally moved from doubtful. That's upgraded from out on the injury report. Nick Claxton remains out with a high left ankle sprain, and it'll be surprising if he is back before December.
I feel like we should add a quip. It might be too much, but I was going to say something like, it doesn't matter because Cam Thomas will score enough for all the Cams that there are. Okay, so I have the next one. Isaac Okoro, Cleveland Cavaliers wing, set to miss a second game with left knee soreness. That's another one. Glad we're doing this because I did not know that he had missed a game with knee soreness.
This is a big one. Jamal Murray, right hamstring strain, is going to miss extended time. The Nuggets have been very clear about that. And so we saw the Nuggets pull out the victory over the Pelicans without him, but that's something to monitor for sure. Also something to monitor, Nikola Jokic has started cropping up on the injury report with a right wrist inflammation. He did play against the Pelicans and had a 35-point triple-double. But again, with Murray injured, that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
A litany of Detroit Pistons injuries, which really struck me as I was watching one of their recent games and saw just like 2 rows deep of street clothes players on the bench. It was not exaggerating. So Joe Harris is going to be reevaluated in 10 to 14 days after being diagnosed with a sprained AC joint in his right shoulder. Jaden Ivey is going to miss a 3rd straight game Wednesday with illness. Jalen Duren remains day-to-day with a right ankle injury. Monte Morris is 2 weeks into a 3-week reevaluation timeline for a right quad strain. Bojan Bogdanovic is 2 weeks into a 4-week reevaluation timeline for a right calf strain. Isaiah Livers is 5 weeks into a 6 to 8 week absence with a grade 3 left ankle sprain. Alec Burks is going to miss his 5th straight game with a left forearm contusion on Wednesday. The Pistons have a really good roster that is not playing right now.
And yet, Jaden Ivey, even when he's not sick, still not playing enough. The Rockets, Amen Thompson left the fourth game of the season with a right ankle sprain, is out of his walking boot, but there's still no timeline for his return. It was initially reported as a weeks-long absence. Tari Eason returned to the practice court for the first time this season after suffering a stress reaction in his left leg. The timeline for his return is also unclear, but head coach Ime Udoka says it will be soon.
For the Clippers, Mason Plumlee has a left MCL strain. He's going to miss at least the next 2 games. Terrence Mann.
Did you see that injury? I didn't see it. People said it was pretty gruesome.
I saw the words like carted off or like
carried off by 2 of his teammates.
Off. Yeah, not great. So at least is the operative term here. Next 2 games. It seems like it may be quite a bit more than that. Terrence Mann, the untradeable, left ankle sprain, has yet to play. He's questionable for Wednesday. Should he start? We're just peppering questions in.
Speaking of a smattering of injuries, the Lakers, after missing 4 games with concussion symptoms, Rui Hachimura will return on Wednesday. Gabe Vincent will be out at least another week with his left knee injury. He's already missed about a week or so. Anthony Davis says his hip injury will be fine, but he's still listed on the Lakers injury report as questionable. Jared Vanderbilt's about 1 week away from being reevaluated with his left heel injury. That has sidelined him for the entirety of the season so far. Jackson Hayes is still day-to-day with his left ankle sprain. Jalen Hood-Schifino is yet to play this season with a right patella contusion and remains a few weeks away, according to head coach Darvin Ham.
Bunch of injuries for the Grizzlies too. Derrick Rose, he's week to week with a left knee injury. John Conchar, doubtful for a second straight game with a hip injury on Wednesday. Xavier Tillman's going to miss his second straight game with right knee soreness. Obviously, Steven Adams, done for the year. Brandon Clark may play later this year. Don't know. Left Achilles injury from last season. And John Morant suspended, not injured, but also not playing for Memphis.
For the Heat, Caleb Martin, his left knee injury, he's only appeared in 1 game so far, still does not have a timetable for return. And Jimmy Butler is still battling right knee tendonitis, which is definitely impacting him. That or he just really doesn't care about the regular season anymore. He is, however, listed as probable for Miami's Wednesday game.
Yeah, speaking of troublesome knee issues, Chris Middleton is still on a pitch count, essentially a maintenance program for his surgically repaired right knee.
This might be one we need to talk about more in depth later on in the podcast, but for the Pelicans, CJ McCollum is out indefinitely with a right collapsed lung. Trey Murphy is now 8-ish weeks into his initial 10 to 12 week timeline on his torn left meniscus. If we know anything about the Pelicans, though, they probably undershot that timeline by a good 4 to 6 weeks. Najee Marshall is about 1 week away from being reevaluated for a bone bruise in his right knee that sidelined him for all season. Jose Alvarado is still listed as out with the right ankle sprain that sidelined him all year. Herb Jones is now dealing with right fibula soreness and on the injury report as questionable. Brandon Ingram, though, has returned from his own bout of knee soreness.
And for the Knicks, RJ Barrett came back from a left knee injury, but says it's an issue that's going to linger for, quote, a little bit.
That seems problematic.
Not great.
For the Thunder, Jalen Williams, big Jalen Williams, J-Will, he is back. Kenrich Williams, however, remains sidelined with back spasms. Still no timeline for his return. Ousmane Dieng is now dealing with pain in his right wrist. That is the right wrist that he fractured last year. So something to monitor there as well. Lou Dort is also now on the injury report with hip issues.
For the Magic, this is a big one. Wendell Carter Jr. is going to be reevaluated in at least 3 weeks after having surgery to repair a fractured third metacarpal in his left hand. Jonathan Isaac is day-to-day with a sore left hamstring. Jonathan Isaac is day-to-day unless he's month-to-month or year-to-year. Gary Harris has missed a couple of games with a groin injury. He's also day-to-day. Markelle Fultz is off the injury report after missing time with left knee issues.
For the Suns, Bradley Beal, who is yet to play this season because of back issues, may make his debut for the Suns on Wednesday.
Is there an injury story that you're more bummed it was just like correct that the Suns would not get all these guys together on the floor? We're gonna hit like December before this happens.
I am. At least it's not Kevin Durant, which is probably the one that you would have bet on having the issues first, right?
Yeah, for sure. But man, how deep are we gonna get before we see these guys? All right, for the Blazers, another fairly significant one here. Robert Williams III needs surgery to repair bone and ligament damage in his right kneecap. There's a cleanup procedure with a 2 to 3 month recovery timeline that is on the table. I mean, this is not the same knee, by the way. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, that as bothered him. He had left knee surgery
yes.
Last year. So Not great. Anthony Simons has another 4 to 5 weeks left on his timetable, coming back from right thumb surgery. Scoot Henderson still day-to-day with a sprained right ankle.
For the Kings, De'Aaron Fox, who they desperately need back, his sprained right ankle continues to have an unclear timetable.
That was a gnarly ankle sprain. Did you see that one?
No, thank God I've missed like all these snapshots of the gruesome looking injuries.
He came back and played after in that game, but it was one of those ones where like the bottom of the shoe, had he been looking down, was visible. Like it had turned over to that degree. For the Spurs, Devin Vassell still dealing with a groin injury that's cost him a couple of games, but has not cost him any space in our hearts or minds because we love Devin Vassell.
Two noteworthy Jazz injuries that have not cost them games yet anyway. To wrap this up, Walker Kessler's day-to-day with a left elbow sprain and listed as questionable heading into Wednesday. Keontae George is dealing with left foot soreness, but not expected to miss time as of now. I do feel like, though, it's worth noting that he had right ankle injury issues at Baylor and also during Summer League. Where do you want to... Oh, I was going to ask you this question first before we could bounce around. Sure. It was in our mailbag from Rome 8180. And I found it fascinating, and it's one I didn't want you to have time to think about. Will younger teams start winning titles under the new CBA restrictions, given how hard it's going to be to keep teams together with payrolls like the Celtics? It seems like the best path to titles might be having 1 to 2 older players and a bunch of players on their first contracts who are unexpectedly good, or is that just too unlikely a roster construction to end up with, considering how hard it is to draft well and how teams with good older players typically don't get lottery picks?
Yeah, that is interesting. A couple thoughts come to mind. First, like what Rome is sort of putting forth here as a potential, the next how champions will be built. I've always kind of thought you need a bunch of guys, whether they're on their first contracts or their minimum signings because they had previous injury histories or something. You need like several players to be dramatically outperforming what they're being paid, in addition to guys that are maxed or near maxed or whatever. Like it always takes both. So I do think, like, whether that means the 1 to 2 players that are maxed or making a ton of money are older and the cheaper guys or the guys outperforming their deals are younger, like that's definitely a viable way to do it. It could also just be, instead of, oh, these guys are young and therefore, they're on rookie scale deals or whatever. It could just be like, you go get your, because I view everything through a Warriors prism, you go get your Otto Porter and Gary Payton for minimums, and then not Jordan Poole. You get rid of him when you pay him too much is what happens. So there's a couple ways to do it. I do think, though, a lot's been written, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff about, the second apron specifically, but all these new changes in the CBA was supposed to just curtail basically exactly what we're seeing teams like the Suns, Bucks, Celtics go out and do. And it's really those teams just taking advantage of a window before the pain really hits. And I think, so I guess my short answer is, like, I don't know what it's going to look like when all of the restrictions are kind of in place. But what seems clear now is a handful of teams are being really opportunistic and doing exactly the opposite of what all the rule changes were designed to do before they sort of can't get away with that anymore. So I don't know what's going to happen when, all of the, restrictions on salary aggregation and how much you can send out and take back and all the draft pick stuff, when those teeth are really kind of out, which they're not yet in total, then maybe like there's a third option that's not being posited here as a way to build a roster that we can't even conceive of yet. I don't know what things will look like then, but yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's just like, you need guys that are playing way better than their salaries, and you need like 5 or 6 of them at a minimum, I think, to really build a great roster.
Yeah, to just add on to what you were saying, I think what the new rules are going to do, probably, I don't know that we start to feel or see the real effects until like 2, 3, 4 years kind of down the line, where not only is it, okay, now all the aggregation rules are in effect, but now teams need to avoid the super tax. They're trying to make sure that their picks aren't locked. I think it increases the importance of everything you said of finding your Caleb Martins. And so that you're still going to need those top end guys. I think what it will also do is I know we've said this time and again, and I am open to the idea that I might be wrong. I don't think we're going to see Clippers type, Suns type formations. And if we do, they're going to be even shorter lived than normal. I think it's going to be a lot of, we have these top 2 guys and we're trying to flesh out the roster around them, rather than let's try and assemble 3, 4 stars. Like the Clippers have 3, the Celtics have basically 4 at this point. And the other thing that I think it will increase the importance of, I think since this prohibits teams a little bit from dealing distant first round picks, I would guess, just because the future is so uncertain, or maybe it increases the urgency with which they do that. It steps on the toes of finding the Caleb Martins, the Otto Porter Juniors, the Gary Paytons. It's, can you get later cost controlled draft picks to hit for you? And I think we're kind of seeing, this isn't a team that's up against it, but like think about what the Mavericks are doing right now with Derek Lively, where he's already starting and being useful. That might not be perfect, but the fact that you're getting serviceable minutes from a rookie in the middle on a team that has playoff or larger aspirations, maybe that's something that becomes more common, where we're seeing these teams that have these 2 really good players and a top heavier payroll or a lopsided payroll. They're going to be more open to starting or drafting guys that they believe can play right away.
Yeah, it might really kind of, I mean, that kind of goes to what Rome's talking about, is you might have just more Derek Lively type guys that like, hey, we need you. You're going to play, because we, the Mavericks are a unique situation because they're, fairly pick poor and you just got to figure some things out. But yeah, I kind of wonder, and I don't have an answer for this, but whenever the CBA changes, there's always some kind of market inefficiency that arises, and eventually everybody figures out how to exploit it, but there's always a few teams that do it first. And I don't know what that's going to be, and I don't know who's going to crack the case first, You know
what it might be is getting players for cheaper on their second contracts, because I do think more than ever teams seem reticent to tie up their cap space and restricted free agents, which I think is objectively stupid personally, but it does seem they're more hesitant than ever to do that. And now we're seeing players kind of recognize that and say, well, I can't be guaranteed that I'm going to have an outside market once I get there. And so Cole-Anthony, as an example, 3 years and what was it, 39 million? Yeah. Like, he's not even making mid-level money when that thing kicks in, basically. So are we going to see players? Yeah, you're still going to have to max out the guys who are, Jason Tatum or Anthony Edwards. Like, you have to max out those guys, but everybody else, were the upper middle class, like the players who are question marks, if they don't want to roll the dice, because Cole-Anthony's not a guy that was ever going to enter the max contract discussion. And so if you're not there or close to it, are they going to sign what I would deem more reasonable or team-friendly extensions than maybe you would have assumed that they got, because of how restricted free agency has almost become? Has it become more repressive just because teams don't seem to want to engage aggressively? I mean, look what happened to PJ Washington this year.
I wonder if that is a signal, and like what that may end up doing is kind of creating, I hesitate to call like I don't know, you mentioned Cole-Anthony, but like Denny Avdia, signed another deal that was like, that's not the kind of deal that would have gotten signed, a few years ago, just because it is it's mid-level territory. And, someone like him and PJ Washington is what made me think about this. Those guys probably get advised or have been advised in the past to just get to free agency, get to restricted free agency. And like, it's only going to take one idiot, someone's going to overpay you, because you got 30 chances in theory, not everybody has cap space, but like someone, just let's get out there and see. And worst case, we'll just come back. And now maybe it's like, it's a little bit more of almost like a baseball setup, where a lot of teams, it's totally different rules, but like, the Atlanta Braves, for example, I may have just alienated all of our audience because nobody cares, but there are teams that just pay long-term deals at,
is that a football team?
Way less annual value to lock up young prospects. It's like you get a 9-year deal that's going to pay you $120 million. Whereas if like this guy hit free agency when he's 27, he might sign a $400 million deal, but you just don't know. And guys are taking these deals for the security. And so maybe the Avdias and the Cole-Anthonys are just like, I'm going to take this, this life-changing money now, because I'm not sure there's going to be an idiot out there that's going to overpay me in free agency if I wait that long.
Right. And even I'm also wondering, and this is from the team end, where the Denny Avdia extension, I think, would be a good one, just because that number sort of, I get what, like Denny Avdia wanting long-term security, but this also is the Wizards. The cap is going up and we're going to get this deal that should be still movable as a nice matching piece. Is this also, look at what the Spurs just paid Zach Collins. Do we see any pullback from the teams here on extensions where, like you'll always offer the Neesmiths whatever he just got, but like, would you see the Avdia extension, the Zach Collins extension, once we know how much the cap has actually gone up? Once the TV deal is signed and you're not dealing with in theory, oh, there could be all this growth. Yes, it's projected to be this, but it might just go up more, or it's going to go up X amount year over year because they're going to smooth it out. Once you have that number smoothed out and you know what you're working with, do maybe see teams pull back because it's not as much as a mystery? That could be something else to monitor.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, again, we're going to need another couple years at least to really sort of see what the new CBA is going to change about how we got some signs already, but I'm really interested because you just never know, like when, for example, a couple CBAs ago when it's like, we got to keep these small market teams from losing their superstars. So let's give them the option to, extend early and go out longer. And then Anthony Davis is like, no. Like this is going to go the other way. There'll be more player movement because I'm going to sign this deal and then get out. Like there's just, you never know. Let's see. Good question. That spurred some discussion. Do you want to bounce around?
It came up when I was doing it and I was like, I'm going to save this because I'd like to actually have someone to talk to about it other than myself, believe it or not.
I'm glad you thought.
You want to take us to our first bouncing around topic?
You want to talk Thunder? I'm interested in the Thunder.
Look, we talked about Wemby on a podcast, so we're not allowed to talk about the Thunder because we were accused of not liking Chet Holmgren enough somehow because we like Wemby. But
so I am gonna talk about Chet a little bit.
Please use this Thunder segment as a launching pad to talk about Wemby.
Well, first of all, I feel like all my Jalen Williams propaganda checks our Thunder box pretty.
I actually called that one out on Twitter because I found it so egregious that the logic, like, first of all, how insecure are you as a fan that this bothered you? And two, if you listen to us even once before, there's probably a good chance that a Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren reference came up.
There's a great chance
in general.
There's a great chance if you just like pop into any of the last like 25 podcasts we've done, it's like 50-50 that you will pick a random time anywhere. There's a really good chance that I will be comparing Jalen Williams to like a mythological figure of some kind. That just like throw a dart at the timestamps and decent chance that's what's going to happen.
You basically said that Jalen Williams is who God prays to.
Yeah. Like, all the time. I'm like verbatim. I'm sure that's in there somewhere. And Jalen Williams is like, I'm busy. Sometimes I can't take everybody's call. So the Thunder, they're just some like to set a little baseline here. 4-3 through their first 7 games, plus 1.8 net rating, 9th in offense, 20th in defense. Only played 2 road games. It's interesting that like those are kind of middling numbers, and I feel like the narrative coming into the year was, oh, this is the team that's going to take a leap. And then there was some pushback to that. I think we both kind of leaned more towards like, let's chill out. And Sam Presti fueled some of that because I think he said, we might have borrowed some wins or something like that. Yeah. And then the other one more recently, I forget who wrote the piece, but it was like, we have to finish our breakfast is his latest quote as a way of saying like, let's not skip steps. So the Thunder are just like a fascinating team because objectively, when you watch them, you see Chet Holmgren. It's there. So timestamp it, Dan. Where are we? We're going to talk Chet Holmgren. You see him looking like, I don't know. This is an interesting. Maybe we should just spend an hour on this. Like, what is the comp for Chet Holmgren? I saw someone say Kevin Garnett recently, and I can't get there because he was just defensively on another level. But Holmgren's ball handling, especially in the open court, like he's so comfortable behind the back, like pullbacks, like, overhand crossovers, like real, like only stuff guards who have gone to like personal trainers since 2020, like have the dribble package that Chet Holmgren has right now. And he's 7 feet tall or whatever he is, 7'2". So he looks amazing. SGA is a known commodity at this point. Jalen Williams, I've just already said he refuses God's phone calls because he's busy. And then like their numbers are kind of just okay. And I wonder if part of that is they're playing Chet at center and they're getting, so just a couple more stats. They allow tons of rim attempts and corner threes. They're 24th and 29th in terms of like their ranking in opponent frequency on those shots. That's bad. You don't want that. And they're second to last in defensive rebounding. They're marginally worse on both the offensive and defensive glass with Chet in the game. And so I'm just thinking like, this is what Presti is talking about because we're going to play Holmgren because look at the guy. You can't not play this guy, but I think his frame still does limit him. And if you're going to be a center, he's just going to be overmatched, and he's going to be in space a fair amount too. So I don't know if the Thunder are going to be able to overcome some of the rebounding issues they have. So they have, like, even with all this talent, like some systemic flaws that may or may not get fixed. And these are all like big picture things you have to think about if you're projecting the Thunder as like a team that's going to be in the top 4 in the West for like the next 5 or 8 years. So I just think, like, what it's crystallizing for me is that the people that were pushing back a little bit on the here comes the leap, and we're probably, I think, closer to right than wrong. And I think Presti, even though it's like so self-serving to tamp down expectations on a team you're the general manager of, is kind of right, because they are going to play these young guys. They are now built around, a center who's essentially a rookie, and you're just going to have like growing pains, and you're going to have real issues, especially on the boards and on other stuff. So I guess my bounce around Thunder talk idea is that I think we kind of had it pegged like pretty close to right. And now they'll probably win 14 games in a row and make this look incorrect. But I just wanted to get some Thunder thoughts on the record now that we're like less than 10% of the way through the season. Do you have Thunder thoughts, or does any of that spark some tangents you'd like to go on?
Despite me thinking that Victor Wembanyama will be a good NBA player, I had a lot of Thunder thoughts, and they were on my list. Chet was among them. I don't really have much to add to what you said, other than I actually have been impressed with how strong he has been with the frame when you look at some of the guys he's had to battle. And I know a lot of people, they've latched on to and I didn't interpret first of all, what Jokic said was funny, saying I think he needs to get fatter.
Chet did not like it. Did you see Chet's reaction to that?
Oh yeah.
He didn't like it. He didn't think it was funny.
First of all, this Thunder team is the antithesis of how that organization is run on social media, because they're just ultra buttoned up, and their public relations department is notoriously difficult and going a quarter off. This is why I love that we're not predicated on access with this podcast. I say something like that, where it just seems like they suck when it comes to providing access to media. And this team just feels like they're all over. So I love it. And so I love that energy. But I had said, people were talking about how Chet's getting bounced around again. It was during that Pelicans game. And so my take is this: Chet does need to get stronger, but there's also just a level of this is a spicy take. So I'm glad you're sitting down. Maybe just brace yourself a little additionally. Some teams have a front line with Nikola Jokic and Aaron Gordon or Jonas Valanciunas and Zion, and other teams do not.
Most do not.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at with it. But I do. He's eventually going to need to get stronger. I'm wondering if Jay Will coming back can help their defensive rebounding issues at all. I have been a little bit surprised because by the way, to finish up on Chet, defenses are still shocked when he puts the ball on the floor. Yes. Like they don't understand what's happening when he spins or when he's going behind the back. It's kind of evident in his drives. He's averaging 0.88 points per drive, which is one of the 10 highest marks in the league among 139 players who finished at least 25 drives. So, and he's shooting 12 of, oh no, that's free throws. He's shooting 12 of 19 on drives. So 63.2%. And he's at 0.881 points per drive. That's great. Another rookie on this team that's impressed though, Cason Wallace he's ready defensively. He competes. He's been very plug and play on the offensive end. And because they have Chet, and like we've seen some of the highlight defensive plays from him, what they've gotten from Cason Wallace, having Lou Dort, the fact that they're so low when it comes to forcing opponent turnovers this year, they were second last year, and now they're 23rd right now. And so it's still early, and that can correct itself. I don't know what it is that's different about how they're running their defense. Maybe it's just a lot of you've had Ousmane Dieng in there more since he hasn't been, although he's injured again now. You have Chet Holmgren, who's a rookie, and you have Cason Wallace, and they're still fouling a bunch as well. And I wouldn't say they've been like passive on defense. That's something that helped fuel their defense last year, was the ability to, okay, you can't trust them on the defensive glass, but they're going to force turnovers. They're going to get out and run that way. And so while they're fouling a little bit less, it's disproportionate to how little they are forcing opponent turnovers. And so a lot of that might just be, well, look, opponent shots are going in at a higher clip right now. You already mentioned some of the issues that they had with the shot profile. that's something that I think if you're not going to be a good defensive rebounding team and you want to play as small as they do for certain instances, that's something that I do think they kind of need to recapture.
Yeah, I think just to put a button on the Chet thing, like he does play really hard and with like a lot of physicality. Like he definitely is not avoiding contact. This isn't someone that's getting like pushed. He's trying to push around just as much as he's being pushed around. So like I think in terms of his approach, he's doing all you can ask of him. It's just like they also just really play, a bunch of wings next to him. There's not like anybody, Jalen Williams, I think, plays a lot of 4 for them. And that's like, so it's not all on him. But I think also he's just doing what he can do with this. Like he like attacks off the dribble. Like you said, it's not just like, he's not, he can sidestep. He has that. He can spin, but he does like lower the shoulder sometimes. So I think if he gets any stronger at all, like maybe then he's just, I don't know, maybe he is Kevin Garnett. We'll see.
We are very close to needing to have a conversation about Josh Giddey. I don't think we're there yet. And maybe some of it has to do with they are running units a little bit differently this year. We've seen a lot more J-Dub as kind of being an orchestrator for bench heavier mobs rather than Giddey. But the inefficiency doesn't look great on him.
You know how last year I would always say I only ever see the good Gabe Vincent games. So I'm convinced that Gabe Vincent is really great. I only ever see the good Josh Giddey stretches. I think that's clear because I'll look up
Thunder this year.
I do, and I just only ever see him like I forget. It was probably against Golden State. Yeah, it was against the Warriors. So he had like 4 or 5 just head down drives in a row where he scored. And I was just like,
and getting all the way to the basket. Wow.
No, he was making difficult shots. That's the thing, and that's why he has like 44% true shooting, and that's it's not going to work, but. I only ever see good Josh Giddey plays. And so I don't believe that the math is real. That's what I'm saying. It's fake. The numbers are fake. He's not one of the worst, least efficient shooters in the league.
Let's take another victory lap. I'm going to take us to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who we both hit the over on them this year, right?
We did.
And did we both, you had them on your list too?
Well, but I was going to skew negative. So I was going to contradict myself, but I would love to go on this victory lap with you first.
Okay. So they are good. They beat the Celtics. They beat the Nuggets. And I did not watch the Nuggets game, but it's become pretty clear. People in Discord were talking about it. They are giving Denver just defensive problems by saying, hey, we're going to park like Karl-Anthony Towns will be on Jokic and then we'll have Rudy Gobert on the back line. And that's how we'll gum things up. This team though is now first in points allowed per possession on the defensive end. Not something that I would have necessarily predicted looking at their roster. Their transition defense, thanks to an apathetic Karl-Anthony Towns, can still be shaky, but it's improved since Jaden McDaniels has come back. They have the league's best half-court defensive rating by a mile. It's not even close right now. They're allowing like 0.81 points in the half court, and the next closest one I believe is the Clippers, and they're allowing like 0.85 or something. And so it's just they've absolutely killed it there. A big part of that is because Rudy Gobert, I haven't thought about awards, but he's in the defensive player of the year race right now. Like opponents are scared again when they're getting into the lane, and he's all over the place too. If you're kind of watching him off the ball with the way that, some of the teams look, he was on Kristaps for a lot of the Boston game when they were playing out Horford as well. And he's pulled out from the paint and he's like the speed. It's just a different player that we've seen this year, even on offense. I think that he's been better. So I don't know if it's an issue of him being healthier, more comfortable, both. It's a big deal for the Timberwolves. They're no longer fouling like wild, and that's been a big deal. They are getting a little lucky on opponent threes. Opponents are shooting like 32.3% or whatever on threes per cleaning the glass. That's going to go up. But I think that the bigger development is Rudy Gobert. It's also Naz Reid, by the way, incredible at both ends. He has just been, the floor game is still there. He can give you the occasional post up. He's hitting his above the break threes. He's looked really good in basically every single defensive situation that I've seen him in. The rim protection started improving last year. It's held serve for the most part this year. And then Anthony Edwards, we have to talk about. This is, I don't know how to frame it. And we go back to that fourth quarter with the Celtics, the stuff he's doing on defense, and it's for pockets of time, probably because he shoulders so much of a burden on offense. It's special stuff. This is someone who could make an all defense team in any given season. I don't know if he'll ever hold it for a long enough stretch to be mentioned in that. But if the Wolves are going to have the best defense in the league this year, or top 3, it'll be Rudy Gobert, and then Jaden McDaniels, depending on, it's just because he hasn't played as much. Anthony Edwards will get residual mention there, but he is, some of the rotations he has made around the baskets, some of the gaps he has shot on closeouts, and then just, we've always known that he can kind of lock down in certain one-on-one situations. We saw him really going after Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum in that Boston game. I think what is, and this will lead into some concerns with them, the offense has not looked great. Anthony Edwards has been really good, but I do think the dual big setup, it does not allow him to get to the basket as much. And he's kind of needed to offset that by one. He's just hitting a ton of his off the dribble threes. Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, and Luka Doncic are the only players who have hit more off the dribble threes to start the season. Edwards is still shooting 54+% on his drives. I'd probably like to see him take fewer ultra long twos, but he's hit some really tough runners in lieu of the rim stuff. And that's kind of how he's adapted. And he's thrown some really just great nifty kickouts. The live dribble playmaking, I think, is still on the come up. Aside from him, though, and they're like, Naz Reid's been a bright spot, even Rudy Gobert a lot of the times offensively. The offense is 25th in 3-point attempt rate. They're not getting to the rim nearly enough. This is a team, I know they're not necessarily built for it, but when you have Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, and even Rudy Gobert and Karl, you can run after getting a defensive rebound. It's not illegal. You can get out and run. So try doing something like that. And maybe this still has a lot to do with the newness. And I do think if they did push the ball a little bit more off the defensive boards, that would address some of the absence of rim pressure here. And then two things is the final notes. I've very much enjoyed seeing Naz Reid, Slow-Mo, and Anthony Edwards play together. They are just and I would like to see the three of them play with Jaden McDaniels more as he's as he's been back longer. They're forcing turnovers like crazy. When those three are on the court, the Timberwolves are forcing turnovers on 20% of opponent possessions, which is just ludicrously high. And the final note here, and maybe the most important note, despite all the good things we're saying, Karl-Anthony Towns has been dog shit to start the season. I'm not making a personal attack at him. I want to see him play really well. I think he can be a fantastic player, but his 3-point volume needs to come up. They need him to be more aggressive, not just launching threes, but going after smaller players. The defensive issues are always going to be there, but he's just so often caught off balance at even more than usual. I don't know if something else is wrong there. We're getting to the point where he makes $36 million this year. Who wants to pay him the 4-year, $223 million extension that kicks in next season? And if you're the Wolves, the fact that moving Karl-Anthony Towns might be necessary to help your offense is just mind melting because he's supposed to be that outlet. And so that's just, I know it's early, but that's what I'm watching, because the path to them becoming appreciably better on offense, just based off how everyone's playing right now, is Karl-Anthony Towns just finds that gear and maintains it, or they're able to find someone who values Karl-Anthony Towns enough to send them players that might help them get there.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that.
I think I just talked for 80 minutes nonstop.
No, and as you talked, I was like, well, there goes my point. But I was going to be a little more bearish on Minnesota because that number one defense is like you mentioned the stat. They are lucky in opponent 3-point percentage. That's the third lowest mark in the league. Last year they were 23rd in that stat. The opponent shot something like 37.3% last year on threes.
Which are fairly, it means they're due.
They're due, right? Exactly. It's fairly well established. That's mostly luck. Some teams tend to do it year over year, but that's pretty iffy. And just to underscore, it's like you led with it. They've beaten Denver and Boston. You know who else has beaten Denver or Boston? Nobody. Minnesota has both of them. But in those games, I have the numbers here because I just couldn't believe it. Denver shot 18.2% from three in that loss. Not good. Boston shot 28.2% from three. So that's just illustrative of the fact that they've mastered the Wolves have mastered phantom 3-point defense, or they've been getting a little lucky. You hit that. I'm not going to belabor it. I think Minnesota's good. We've said it for a while. I think that defense is not going to hot take. The Wolves will not finish with the best defense in the league.
Will they be top 5? With the way Rudy Gobert is
So
playing.
that's the thing, right? They have Rudy Gobert, they have Jaden McDaniels. We all agree. If you watch Anthony Edwards like move around for 5 seconds, you say that guy has the tools to be an incredible defender. So there's 60% of your first unit. Conley knows where to be. He can't. He's in his 20 millionth year, so whatever. And Towns is just bad. But so yeah, top 5 should seem plausible. I just wonder if Edwards can stay locked in like he can be for stretches. I wonder if Gobert still really has it or will sustain it. And I wonder if Towns is like hideable enough. But so the Towns thing is the most interesting issue here, because as I rewatched the fourth quarter against Boston, and all I could think about was, in addition to, my God, Anthony Edwards is trying to just like take everyone's head off on both ends. He basically assaulted Jason Tatum and got a jump ball out of it late in that game. It was unbelievable. Is that Towns is just, and it's mostly situational, because you can't put him near the basket because Rudy Gobert's there. And if you put a smaller guy on him, so he can't go post up and exploit a switch that way. Rudy Gobert's there. So now you have a really, really highly paid pick and pop power forward that can't guard anybody. And what do you do with this guy? So it made me realize there's this idea I've always had of Towns objectively is ridiculously talented. He has his early career numbers, stack up against almost anybody in terms of the 2010 stuff and the 3-point shooting and all this other stuff. But then it's if he can't fit, so is it on Minnesota for putting him in a position where so many of his skills are marginalized? Or is it that he actually just is not someone that any team should ever pay what he's making? Because he just, before Gobert was there was plenty of Towns criticism, and that had more to do with can he defend and what happens to him in high stakes games? Why does he lose his grip on reality? So it's tough because he's stuck. If you go trade for Karl-Anthony Towns now, that salary's coming with him. There's nothing you can do about it. So now everyone's talking about, well, the Wolves can't pay all these guys, and you've got to break up your centers, and Towns is the most likely guy to be traded. I just wonder if it's going to have to be Gobert, because you can't trade Towns, because teams are going to see what he's doing and realize well, he's not getting better. He's deep enough into his career where he sort of is what he is. We can change his situation, but then if he's our best player, which he should be, if he's making the money he's making, we turn into the Timberwolves of the late 20 teens, and we, make a play-in game once in a while. I think almost by default, the way the Timberwolves get out from the financial quagmire that they're going to be in soon enough is almost maybe not going to be to trade Towns, because you sort of can't do it for positive value.
Well, so my pushback there would be, I think the fact that he's 27 and some of the harbingers are just, he's shooting 26.5% on wide open threes. And even Chris Finch said those shots are eventually going to go in. And having someone with his ball skills and shooting, that didn't just go away. And we've seen moments of it where he gets ultra aggressive, puts the ball on the deck. I don't know. You pose an interesting question, whether is there a John Collinsification of Karl-Anthony Towns here, because they've marginalized him with the way John Collins was in Atlanta. However, he's still posting 27 plus usage this year, and the opportunity's there for him to get volume. He needs to be more aggressive with it. So I think this is more, they can probably share the blame. Certainly more. I blame Atlanta for what happened to John Collins. I mean, we're seeing some kind of issues in Utah too, but they also were playing him with, to basically two other bigs, in Larry Markkinen and Walker Kessler. I do wonder though, I think more likely than them just deciding to trade Gobert at this point would be, do they pull the John Collins with Karl-Anthony Towns? It's we can get back expirings and we just pivot from there. And that's the way. I don't think we're there. I want to make clear, Karl-Anthony Towns is really talented. I was trying to figure out how we could get Zach LaVine back to Minnesota in a Karl-Anthony Towns trade, though. I mean, Towns for Zach LaVine would be an interesting challenge trade, but then Chicago still has Vooch. It's you kind of need a third team that would, are you either sending Vooch there, or are you sending Towns somewhere that's going to send you enough stuff to get Zach? Could you imagine Zach LaVine on this team? That would really test their number one defense, by the way.
Yes, it would. And then what? So Edwards and LaVine are your backcourt now? Because
it's it's Conley, Edwards, LaVine, McDaniels, Gobert. Sign me up. You have Kyle Anderson coming off the bench.
Yeah,
Alexander Walker coming off the bench.
If Karl-Anthony Towns is your best player, which he sort of has to be because he's paid like it, or second best, like how good are you? And you know what I mean? Like that's
probably Zach LaVine is your best player territory, right? Maybe even worse.
I don't know. I think and I'm coming off watching that fourth quarter where Towns just fouled out and had like 7 points. And I just about as you're catching me at a low point on Towns.
His swings are so wild.
Yeah.
And so I'm still hopeful, but I do wonder if it's going to happen for him on this team. Is just because of the makeup with it. And if it's going to happen for him on this team, is it because they got rid of Gobert? In which case, I don't know how that optimizes them for the short or long term, to be honest with you.
That trade, the Gobert trade, it's just like there's so many fascinating like back and forth angles to it. And probably what are they 6 games into the season is not the best time to litigate all of it, because the whole argument was we don't have enough of a sample based on last year to make any judgments, and certainly 6 more games isn't going to change that. But I guess maybe my takeaway is I'm more fascinated to watch Minnesota this year now than I was before the season started, because I just like all I have are more questions, even though because like who had them as the best defense in the league through the first like no chance. I would have thought their offense, if you said they'll be number one on one end or the other, I would have said offense, just because I would assume Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns were just going to be amazing. McDaniels was going to hit half his threes, and that's how it would go. But
it's not outside the realm, because you have Gobert, McDaniels, and Edwards. And so that's 3 above average defenders in your most important lineup immediately. Then you can throw Slow-Mo in there, Nickeil Alexander-Walker for extra disruption. Mike Conley still is not some sieve, even though he's getting up there in age.
Yeah.
So it's really, I get what you're saying. I probably would have said they'll be better on offense just because, you have Conley, the Anthony Edwards leap, and Towns will be healthy. It basically would have come down to Towns to be like, if Towns is going to be healthy and a prominent part of this rotation, your offense is going to be better.
Yeah. I guess I have like a quick one here, and you mentioned you had talked about him, so I might even just defer to you a little bit. Jalen Johnson and the Hawks sort of in conjunction here. I don't know how you felt about it, but I kind of viewed Atlanta as having sort of a handful of guys I thought of as like similarly valuable, or guys who would roughly similar positions. DeAndre Hunter, AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson. Now John Collins is out of the way, and so all those guys theoretically get more room to explore the space. And I think I've just been more impressed by Johnson than anybody. Hunter's had his moments.
Without him hitting jumpers, by the way, and you're impressed with them.
I just think like, first of all, here's some analysis. Every time I see Johnson on the floor, it's like, that guy, like how big is that guy? Like he looks like a classic power forward from like 20 years ago, except he does like small forward things with the ball. So he's 14.3 points, 8.9 boards, 62.5% true shooting. Pretty darn good. His athleticism in the open floor is just like something that John Collins used to provide. Although I think Johnson plays with even more force. Like some of his drives and some of his transition attacks are just like, you have to get out of the way of this guy. He's like that kind of athlete, which is a really cool wrinkle to have in Atlanta, where like Trae Young kind of defines how they play, which is more of a finesse style, a lot of floaters, a lot of lobs, a lot of like manipulating space. Johnson is just like the shortest distance between 2 points guy. So that's fun. The other thing that's interesting with like the way that Atlanta is playing, and this is part of the reason Johnson's effective or more effective, is because he's such a good athlete, and Atlanta is cutting a lot more than they have certainly, in the Trae Young era. So they are 4th in the percentage of their offense that comes on cuts this year, and number 1 in efficiency in terms of points per play. They were 17th last year in cut frequency, and they were worse, obviously, in points per play. I think that's the Quin Snyder effect. I think that's Trae Young maturation. That's probably Trae Young and DeJounte Murray sort of working more comfortably together in tandem. I just like, if you're spinning this forward, I guess maybe this is just a question I'll throw to you, and you can give me your Jalen Johnson thoughts or Hawks thoughts. I wonder if maybe Atlanta should just be the team we view as the 4th best in the East. And the Knicks would have something to say about that, the Sixers, but you got Boston, Milwaukee. I know you've talked about Milwaukee. We may need to hit on them at some point just because the defense is crazy.
They're back to playing drop though.
So now it's probably all fixed now that Brook Lopez is back in a deep drop. Also, by the way, Adrian Griffin, we've talked about AJ Griffin just now, so now we can talk about his dad. Basically getting talked out of his defensive scheme by certain players. What on earth made you think it was smart to do anything different with Brook Lopez on defense? So we got to talk about the Hawks before we'll come back to the
we don't even need to. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Continue with the Hawks.
That's all on the Hawks. So it's a hot take because the Sixers exist and they look really good and they're probably the fourth best team in the East. But like maybe fifth. Let's say fifth. Are they better than the Knicks? Just because the Hawks with Trae Young, offense unto himself, like he's great. And now they're just sort of playing in a more sensible way that maximizes all these other talented guys that just wasn't happening before. So I think the Hawks, I don't want to say fourth. I think the Hawks are the fifth best team in the East. And they have a chance to get to 4 if, the Sixers have injuries or the Bucks continue to not know how to guard anybody.
Yeah, I went into my detailed Jalen Johnson thoughts, so I don't want to parrot it on the.
Well, tell me what I got wrong or what else.
You didn't get anything wrong. I just think I'm wondering if there's like an extra element to his game where they've had him take some trailer jumpers. Can he hit those? And that opens up everything else because you're right about the drives. I think defensively, you mentioned that he plays a lot of like forward stuff, but he also does a lot of big man stuff where he's like kind of rotating around the basket. I think when I checked, opponents shooting 50% against him at the rim this year.
That's good.
That's pretty good. And that would lead itself. I was like, wow, for someone who is listed, where's he listed at 6'9", 6'8", and you're telling me he looks like he's 7 foot. Yeah, there you go. So we should look at what is Jalen Johnson listed at. I didn't even think. I just assumed I knew his height. So he is listed at 6'8". So it's just shenanigans. You're calling. They're doing the KD here. He's really 7'1".
Yeah, he's 7'1", 340. That's what he plays like.
That's the silver lining of the John Collins trade. Is they ruined John Collins' value, but it opened up a pathway to him getting playing time. With Atlanta, I think I could buy what you're saying about them, in part because I don't know what the pathway is to them getting much better on the defensive end right now, but they're 6th in offense, and Trae Young is shooting 27% on threes.
That's the other thing.
And their shot profile is a little bit better. They're getting to the rim, which I think has a lot to do with you mentioned the ball and body movement goes a long way here. And because they were like bottom 7 in rim frequency last year. What is happening with Trae Young? And I wonder if this is part of the adjustment. I think it's 34.1. This is because I wasn't prepared to talk about the Hawks. I think it's 34.5% of his baskets are coming off assists. He has never had more than like 27% of his baskets come off assists. So there is a material change in the way that he's playing. And so now it becomes, speaking of the debate of, well, who's least malleable between Luka, Harden, and Trae, it feels like it's probably Harden.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I will say Harden looked, I was trying to get from malleable to like overweight because that white Clippers jersey was not doing him any favors. He's not in shape. So
he said that too. He was like, damn, I forgot how fast the game was or something was his quote.
I didn't come prepared. We're jumping all over the place now. I did not come prepared with Clippers thoughts. Is that going to be one of your topics you're going to get to?
Well, so to wrap up on the Hawks, then we can get to we probably should talk about.
We kind of did already talk about the Clippers though when we did the Harden trade.
I don't have anything to add. It's been I don't think they should start all 4 of their stars is basically where I'm at. So yeah, to wrap up, I could buy what you're selling on the Hawks there. Jalen Johnson though. Yeah, that's if people aren't watching the Hawks yet, he's a joy to watch. Can we talk about one of my favorite small market teams, the New York Knicks and RJ Barrett?
Please do.
So I have so many thoughts on the Knicks. It's just, I feel like I should be encouraged probably by the start of their season relative to their schedule and the play that they've gotten from Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. It has not been pretty. I blame Julius Randle for Jalen Brunson's struggles, which is probably irrational. But just like Brunson is seeing so much more attention when he gets into the paint. Like he has to rely more on the pull-up 3, which is fine. That's actually been going in at a fairly good clip for him. But just like he has to work so much harder inside the arc because Julius Randle's either taking the wrong shots, not taking enough shots, not taking enough threes. So I blame Julius. It's also Josh Hart, but it's on Julius Randle. I'm just prepared to blame him for everything. RJ Barrett looks really good this year, and that's without being hyper efficient. Some of the advanced metrics are coming around on him, but he's shooting a career high 65% at the basket. He's getting there less. 65% of the basket's not especially high, but it's closer to league average this time. That's a great development for him. His drives, he's not shooting too well on them, but he's been getting in some of those runners, some of those floaters. He's at 54.5% on floaters. I think 6 of 11 was the number I had written down. I think what I've been most impressed by, there's the 3-point shooting for sure, something that he's getting to the corners more. He's at 52.4% on spot up threes overall, 62% from the corners, and then 25% above the break. And so that is something to monitor. He has gotten a lot better, I feel like, with his decision making as a live dribble ball handler. The passes there are a lot better when you look at some of the ones that he has thrown this season. He's getting better at making quicker decisions from a standstill to keep the ball moving. And he's also getting better at just putting defenders on his hip and maintaining his dribble overall. And it feels like real growth. And then the Knicks, when they play him, we all know about the RJ plus bench mobs, but like when you just play him without Brunson and Randle right now, filter it for that, the Knicks are a plus 9.7 points per 100 possessions. And I think there's some room to kind of, I don't know what the word would be here, but like, let's get more of RJ Barrett and Brunson without Randle units is something that could really be super effective for this team. I'm wondering if we're starting to see, like, is this the turn for RJ? And if it is, I think that increases the urgency with which you need to move on from Julius Randle. I don't want to frame everything. Well, no, I'll frame it this way because I don't want to make everything about dumping on Julius Randle. It increases the urgency with which you need to make the decision to choose between them, where it's let's capitalize on RJ's trade value once the right star, or find a way to get Randle. It's weird because the Knicks are still so reliant on the all-NBA version of Julius. If he's not that guy, this is a substantially worse team. I'm wondering if RJ is now approaching the point where can he bridge some of that gap? I don't think he's there from a shot creation standpoint when you're looking at the levels from where he scores and how he scores, but he's a more, it's not complete. His offensive bag is deeper and more polished than it's ever been, I think.
He's 23. Like I know we do this with
only 23.
I know we do this with Jason Tatum as like a joke. It was like, God, he's so good and he's only 17 or whatever. But like, I think Barrett, you're right. Like he's never had a higher assist percentage and he's never averaged more points per shot attempt. A lot of that, I think you hit it. He's never taken a larger share of his shots from as corner threes than he is this year. So some of it is just like, whether it's he's being told this is where you need to shoot or he's just getting there on his own. The shot diet, even though the rim attempts being down is not great, just is better. And he's just more comfortable with the ball. This is so illustrative of how like this is his 5th year. And I think we've not just you and I, but like the NBA discourse has like raised Barrett to heights and like buried him 6 different times in the 4 years before this one. And he's 23. And so it's just a reminder of like, yeah, sometimes it takes way longer than anybody wants it to for us to get a handle on what kind of player this guy's going to be. You know, it just like, and so from the Knicks perspective, maybe his new deal, or not new, but maybe the deal he signed like looks really great because we're having the conversation now of how do we get Julius Randle out of his way, and he's not maxed. So like, I don't know. I think that's my takeaway from it is like, it's really hard to have a high draft pick who comes in as a teenager and is expected by his 3rd year to just give us a really clear picture of what he's going to be and what he'll be good at and what he won't be good at. And it's just like, it never happens. It just doesn't happen. It takes 5 years, 6 years sometimes. And the guy's still in his early 20s. And so like, you know, that cuts a couple ways. Like for Barrett, it's like, oh no, he's not going to be like just okay. Potentially he might be a lot better than that. And for someone like Anthony Edwards, who we just talked about, it might be, let's not evaluate what he is now. Let's wait till he's 25 and then really see what's possible. You know, the impatience thing is so hard to avoid because, you know, if you're going to evaluate RJ Barrett at any point, like last year, the year before, whatever, you just have to go with what he'd done to that point and praise him or bury him or whatever. But now it's clear that, even this isn't close to his like final form, right? He's just like kind of smoothing the edges off a little bit, and he's still nowhere near what he's going to be. It's hard to think that way when we have to, rank everybody and do winners and losers of this and like who's disappointing and all that stuff.
You gravitate more towards the players who have been all over the place. Whereas if you're consistently bad or like incrementally improving, his role and place within this team has changed so often.
Oh, yeah.
And I will, as much as you could say, if they could have put a better ecosystem around him, maybe he would be better by now. He's never once been good enough for long enough to say the Knicks need to tailor their team around him.
And he's a weird player. He's like specifically a hard player to build. If he's the guy, that's a weird skill set to try to build around.
But at the same time, to his defense, it's okay. The Julius Randle emergence was not something you were banking on. And then it's Jalen Brunson is in town, but there was the year where they didn't have Jalen Brunson and they sucked. And so he's just been like, he's bounced around the pecking order. And I think maybe now he's kind of finding his wheelhouse. And I think his wheelhouse could be larger if the roster looks different. Now, if I feel bad that I just said you need to get rid of Julius Randle, even though I've been on this since his first All-NBA team. I thought that they needed to move him. That's not for the sake of Brunson, Barrett, and Julius Randle. They need better shooting at this. You know what? I'm going to take another victory lap here for all the Knicks fans that were shitting all over me for saying Dante DiVincenzo didn't solve their floor spacing issues. Their volume for threes overall is fine. They're 12th in three-point attempt rate. They're 20th in above the break attempt rate, and then dead last in above the break three-point percentage. You need threats from there. You need guys who are willing to get those attempts up from there. You don't have that. And the players that you have that from, you're not always going to, like Emmanuel Quickly. Okay, are you going to put him in the starting lineup and then just nuke your bench of all the creation that it has at the moment? You can say, well, Quentin Grimes, his volume has probably been fine. Can you nudge him up a little bit? A lot of it might have to do with the way they want to run their centers. I think a lot of it comes back to, though, they're running, the floor is shrinking because of their 4 and 5 spots right now. They really, trading Obi Toppin was kind of a vote of confidence in Julius Randle being really good again this year. I don't know if the ankle stuff is still bothering him, but even when it's Hartenstein, when it's Hartenstein, Randle, Mitchell Robinson, like you're dealing with, until you downsize, you're dealing with like 2 non-shooters on the court at all times. And then even when you are downsizing, like Josh Hart is still doesn't want to take a 3. Like he just doesn't want to do it. It's a corner above the break. He doesn't want to do it.
Have you got an explanation for this? Like what Fred Katz? Can Fred Katz please just get Josh Hart to explain?
Sure that he doesn't have like lifetime language in his contract that was the Mo Harkless deal where it was, but it's like the reverse. You have to take like this many attempts or so. I have no idea, but it's again, it's not just a Julius Randle problem. And it's Mitchell Robinson has probably been their best player this season. So I'm not even saying they need to get rid of Mitch. He's probably, I think if we're going through players where if you were acquiring a star, the Knicks, Mitchell Robinson is probably the guy that most teams would want in that deal. Maybe Quentin Grimes is right there. I'm not talking about picks. We all know everyone wants picks.
Right.
I would say even more than RJ Barrett, even more than IQ, who's about to get paid again. I crapped all over the Mitchell Robinson contract, and it looks like a steal at this point.
We got a shirt apologizing to him. That's a real thing.
Yeah. Hey, check out our merch.
Check out the merch.
I have a couple more, but do you have any others?
We've hit the hour mark, but I do want to ask you, what does MarJon Beauchamp need to do, Dan? What's the guy got to do to play more for the Milwaukee Bucks? Because
he needs to do exactly what he's doing when you're asking, what does he need to do?
Well, then he needs to play more than 15 minutes per game. So opponents are 3 of 19 against him when he is the primary defender. He is shooting 57.1% from 3. That's good. Not high volume, obviously, and we're talking 15 minutes a game. So, limited impact of that high efficiency. So as the Bucks defense is confounding and weird, but also like not totally the Bucks defense being bad, I should say, for anyone that needs that spelled out.
Look, at least no one on this podcast predicted they'd finish in the top 3 of points allowed per possession. We were smart enough not to do that.
We make so many predictions. It's hard for me to keep them straight. It's possible. As you said that, I had to think like, did I predict that?
No, it was, I predicted that they would finish in top 3 in offense.
No, I know. I realize that now because I did a little mental inventory and I said, I predict a lot of ridiculous things, but that I don't think was one of them. But if you said, no, Grant, you predicted that, I would have said,
yeah.
So with Dame, like Damian Lillard comes with like some defensive like you got to figure some stuff out if he's your point of attack defender, and you can hide him, but whatever. Like if you play Malik Beasley, it's a lot harder to hide Dame. And so this is where Beauchamp comes in. So Beasley, quick trigger shooter, I get it. That super valuable if you have a pick and roll heavy attack that is going to suck multiple defenders into the lane. Having Beasley, who's just like never met a shot that he wouldn't take, which is a good, like that's a valuable thing. He's not a defender. So when Beasley and Dame play together without Beauchamp on the floor, the Bucks have a minus 18.4 net rating. So like these are obviously small sample caveats, like sprinkle them everywhere. All this stuff is noisy. And those are including lineups that have Giannis, Brook, Middleton on the floor. MarJon with Lillard and no Beasley are plus 38.5. All I'm saying is every stat you have, small samples and all, say Beauchamp should play more. And the eye test who shows him, which shows him looking super athletic, defending his ass off, running the floor, giving this team another transition threat, just making total sense as someone who should play more, who can give you stuff on either end of the court, which virtually no one else, as long as Chris Middleton is on a pitch count, can do reliably from the wing. Sorry, Pat Connaughton. I think Beauchamp should get some of your minutes. What else does MarJon Beauchamp need to do? I think he needs to play more. I'll be disappointed if he does not. That's not like a discussion point. That's just I cede the floor to you.
I think it's fair, even because like you can put him, and they have, on Tyrese Maxey, on Jalen Brunson, on Trae Young. And it's not all, it's actually, I would say most of the time it might not work out that well for you. It gives you more of a fighting chance than having Damian Lillard have to be in those, or Malik Beasley. And I'm probably with you. I actually wrote something where I've wondered if they should move away from their starting five. And if Chris Middleton's locked in there when he's healthy, I think Malik Beasley shot the ball well enough overall to stay there. But for what they need, it feels like even Crowder might be better than defensively, he's definitely better, but you don't want him defending smaller players. He might just be better than Beasley in that role, or as someone who can help cover up for, like, Chris Middleton looks cooked on the defensive end. Like I can see flickers and flashes and extended pockets of him. Okay, Chris Middleton on offense, fine. No, I don't see it on defense anymore. And so MarJon Beauchamp, them not having to get rid of him, the Damian Lillard deal, suddenly becomes massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will be surprised if he doesn't have, I know like a lot of Bucks fans have been clamoring for it for a long time, but like, I would be really surprised if he doesn't have a pretty significantly increased role, 2 months from now. If he doesn't, I hope it's because Beasley is shooting like 50% from three and Connaughton is, looking like he did 4 years ago.
And you took issue with Adrian Griffin changing because I clipped his interview with ESPN and threw it on Twitter. And I actually posted as more of I appreciate that he realized he was so wrong so early and then made the pivot. But people reacted. I'm not saying you. People were dunking on him like, what an idiot, need to be told to do by his players. And I more so took it as someone who didn't think he was the right hire, and push comes to shove, I probably still don't believe it. I was like, oh, okay, this is good. He's listening to his players, and the defense has looked better. One of the games came against the Knicks that we've seen with them, and look, going against the Knicks offense right now, it's not much. I mean, like
they're taking a victory lap on the Knicks offense, getting a lot worse, but we don't need to do that right now.
They don't have the spacing to, like, you don't even need Brook Lopez on the floor to defend them well at this point. So, but I took it as okay, this is good that he's doing, but I'm assuming you took it the same way, but you thought it was ridiculous that it was ever in doubt.
That was a classic case of like fixing what wasn't broken. We understand what Brook Lopez does defensively. Like that's, and like,
to be
he's
fair,
great at the thing that he's great at. He's like, why are you messing with it? I get it. Like you're trying to compensate probably because Lillard is there. You're trying to force more turnovers, I think was a lot of the explanation. And the Bucks just I think the Bucks might've been 30th in opponent turnover percentage last year. They're at the bottom. And so I get it, like trying to fix that, but also Brook Lopez is just a phenomenal drop defender. Like how many different Zach Lowe articles, like chronicling Lopez's mastery of like the pick and roll dance where he's guarding both guys at the same time and he can close, like, come on. Like, what are we, I love the quick willingness to scrap a plan that's not working, but like that plan didn't need to be drawn up in the first place. I don't think.
You don't think in the name of experimentation, let's bring him higher up, try and force turnovers or cover up for Dame a little bit more?
I know because I think well, part of it is like we don't have Drew anymore, and Drew is like the king of the rear view contest. So you can have Lopez in a deep drop, and Drew is just going to bother the guy, chase over the screen, bother him from behind, and so the drop doesn't really hurt you because everyone's afraid of the all world guard defender that's like breathing down your neck from behind, and then Lopez can just guard pick and rolls on his own too. And Drew's not there. Damian Lillard is not Drew Holiday defensively, obviously. So I can understand like having some concerns about it, but my default would just be let's try the same thing that has worked really well and won us contributed to us winning a championship. And then if that doesn't work, we'll mess with it. But let's at least start from let's start with the thing that has been supremely effective and plays to the strengths of this kind of unusual defensive center. That's
now,
all.
Because you think that MarJon Beauchamp is going to be an MVP.
Yes.
Here's an actual question for you. The Bulls call and say we will take MarJon Beauchamp and Pat Connaughton for Alex Caruso.
Oh, sorry, MarJon. You're out.
You probably have to make that because of what you're giving up some spacing on offense because Alex Caruso is like the Josh Hart of guards when it comes to not wanting to take. Well, but I think you have to do that.
But he's also the Alex Caruso of defensive guards.
But also, can you afford to consolidate your rotation again?
Well, if you're only playing Beauchamp 15 minutes, you're not really consolidating anything. Just I take your point. Like the Bucks can't keep trading like 4 guys for 1, but I would hope
they're lucky when you're looking at the buyout market because they could still sign guys who make less than the mid-level. So if you want to look at maybe Reggie Bullock decides to, I don't know why he's on the Rockets right now. So but I would say the fact that even I guess they didn't need him in the Knicks game, but like him only playing 13 minutes in the Knicks game was sort of mind blowing to me. Yeah. But I'm with you. I expect his role to get bigger. Can we talk about the Pacers?
I'd love to.
All right. Well, then let's move on. You want to talk about the Mavericks? So, the Pacers might have the best NBA offense of all time. And I just watch, and I don't even think they're not first in efficiency. No, the Sixers have the best offense in the league right now. How about that?
Do you have a Sixers thing? I don't have I'm almost out of topics, but every team we talk about, I want to talk about. Let's leave the Pacers. The Sixers look friggin' awesome. I'm a massive addition by subtraction team. But let's talk Pacers.
Addition by subtraction. He wasn't even playing.
Well, they subtracted him before the season started.
Fair enough. So the Pacers they are all over the place on offense. It's frenetic. They're 3rd in average possession time, 2nd in points per possession. They're 8th in half court offensive rating, which is a big deal because they were pretty bad there last year. Jalen Smith has been like a delight from 3, and he's grabbing every offensive rebound that's out there. Aaron Nesmith might be on one of the league's best contracts. All of a sudden, he has some ball skills. He's shooting well. We know he can defend up. Buddy Hield has looked good. This is all happening where Benedict Mathurin has not had the greatest start to the season, but in quotations in my notes I have, does it even fucking matter because of how good this team is on the offensive end? The answer is, you answered it, Grant. No, it does not. I mean, long term, it certainly matters. Miles Turner, career year from 3 right now, career year on the defensive glass. The team is still getting slaughtered when Haliburton doesn't play, but the offense during those stretches is above average. I think even now as I speak at 1 a.m. exactly, my time, Obi Toppin is still running around somewhere on the court. There's not a game happening, but I think he's still running around somewhere. The thing I wanted to highlight, aside from the fact that Tyrese Haliburton is still that guy, I know he's been cooked and targeted on defense. Tyrese Haliburton is currently averaging 1.58 points per ISO possession. He's not using a ton per game, but he's shooting 67% in isolation, effective field goal rating of 83.3. De'Aaron Fox is the only player averaging more points per isolation possession than Tyrese Haliburton right now. And Fox, by the way, he's on track to have a year. I hope that ankle injury doesn't mess with him.
Those guys should play together. They could get a lot done together. Those 2 guys.
That didn't compute when I was even looking at that. I wanted to focus a little bit though, and of course get any thoughts that you'll have on the Pacers. On the Bruce Brown fit, I've enjoyed it for the most part. He's shooting 47% on threes, 31% from above the break, 64% from the corners. I can't remember which game I was watching, but the Pacers had it was him and Turner plus the bench. Aaron Nesmith was out there with Nemhard and Brown, Turner, and Hield and that lineup just looked like it was going to annihilate opponents until the end of time. And so I'd like to see more of that. The Pacers' offensive rebounding rate right now is improving by 9.3 points with him on the court. He is not grabbing them, but when you kind of look, he's lifting from the corner, and it's making it easier on the Pacers, like a Jalen Smith, spot minutes with Isaiah Jackson or whoever, making it easier for them to crash the offensive glass. He's hitting over 60% of his running jumpers. The Pacer spacing looks great on him. Surprise, surprise. I think he has even more space to work with generally in the lane than he did when he was on the Nuggets. He's not doing as much as a passer, but the center floor playmaking is still very much there and remains special. And the thing that I feel like I've noticed, and maybe this is just has a case of, they played Charlotte. They're overreacting to him on the 3-point line. They are treating him like an actual threat, and that has helped open the driving lane. He's shooting 56.3% on drives, which is how he's going to make a lot of his passes. And so I'll wrap up on the Bruce Brown fit with this. 71 players have finished as many drives as Bruce Brown. Only 3 others are shooting 55+% with an assist rate north of 10 and a turnover rate south of 5. Tyrese Haliburton, Kyrie Irving, and Terry Rozier. I love the Bruce Brown fit. He has not had this great impact on their defense. He's been overmatched in a lot of the matchups he has, and the defense has been worse with him on the court, but I think that just says the quality of the players that he's going up against and that starting lineup has to face, or their most important players have to face a lot of the time. The Pacers, true to what everyone, I think, all geeks thought heading into the season, they have been one of the most entertaining watches of the season.
Yeah, that was a given. I want to ask you, because in the lead up to this season, and I think probably when we talked to Caitlin Cooper about this, there was this
what
idea
are the odds that Caitlin Cooper had something written, one, either counter proving anything I just said, where it's like, actually, Bruce Brown's not lifting from the corner and he doesn't help their offensive rebounders at all. There's probably a good chance that she's either said everything I did, which fine,
or you're wrong, and she'll tell you why.
I've read so much of her. She's been publishing a lot lately, so I haven't read it all, but I've read a lot of her stuff, and I'm trying not to latch on to anything she says, because it's just, you don't want to co-opt, but she's so smart and great at what she does. It's hard not to.
Well, one of the things she said that I really bumped on, and this isn't like an opinion of hers, it's basically a correct assessment of what the Pacers think, is that Mathurin is going to start, Hield is not, and that's because they need to figure out what they have. It made a lot of sense. And I bumped on it because Mathurin seemed to me like his ceiling is as a really good 6-man, pure scorer that's not good at a lot of the other stuff you need to round out a really good starting lineup on the wing or as a second guard. And to your point, and how Brown has fit well, the lineups that have Brown and Hield as the wings, whether you have Nesmith as the 4 or Toppin at the 4, some of these are hilariously effective lineups. But if you have Hield and Brown on the floor together, the Pacers are plus 17.8, and the offense is scoring 140 points per 100 possessions, which actually might be below the Pacers' full season figure, but no, it's not. But which is absurd. My favorite is it's only 15 possessions, but I'm going to cite it because it just illustrates.
That's a huge sample size. That's more than 14
15 possessions. That's like an entire quarter almost. It's like half of a quarter.
Yeah. I was like, what team is using 60 possessions for 48 minutes?
The Rick Carlisle Dallas Mavericks from 3 years ago. Haliburton, Hield, Brown, Toppin, Turner, right? Which I think should be the starting 5. Plus 80 net rating. That's fun. That's fun in 15 possessions. But it's just the question buried in all this is, is it too obvious that Mathurin should just never start, and that we should just be playing Hield and Brown and on the wings, and probably Toppin at the 4? I like Toppin more than Nesmith. And then obviously Turner and Haliburton as your bookends. Has anything changed about, because I thought from the jump, Mathurin should not start, not over Brown, not over Hield. I mean, give me Nembhard or whatever over Mathurin at this point. Just turn Mathurin loose off the bench and say shoot all the time against backups. I don't know where you were on any of that, or if you remember Caitlin saying that Mathurin was probably going to be the Pacers pick to start and play a ton. Have you? What are your thoughts generally on that? I guess you're loving Bruce Brown, so that's easy. But what about the Hield piece?
Doesn't it? It comes down to what are your aims? do you care? If you care more about the bigger picture, it's valuable gleaning as much information, good or bad, from Mathurin as possible. And I don't think you're putting him. Are you putting him in a better situation to succeed himself or for you long term by bringing him off the bench? I don't know. The quality of the defensive competition should go down, but then you're also, he's insulated right now a lot of the time because you're going to play more minutes than alongside Tyrese Haliburton. Along with sure, Jalen Smith is hitting his threes now, but like you're guaranteed to play alongside the spacing of a Miles Turner. So if you're trying to win games, the answer is Mathurin should not be starting now.
So I think of all, by the way, was I a year or 2 years too early on Jalen Smith? I know I was saying Jalen Smith was going to be really good for the Pacers. That must have been
during that like 7-game stretch after they traded him, he hit his threes. Everyone's like, wow.
Yeah. I knew he had it in him.
New normal.
I guess, and it won't sound totally hypocritical and contradictory. It just will be, because I just said, RJ Barrett's in his 5th year. We've jumped to conclusions, and look what happens if you wait. I just never thought Mathurin projected to me based on one rookie season as someone that's going to be more than a really like a spark plug backup. And that's just because like the decision making he's not great at it. He's awesome at getting fouled. He's awesome at generating his own shots. He sucks as a catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He likes to dribble at first, which is just weird to me. So I guess I always just wrote him off as like, what do the Pacers think they're going to find here? I already know this guy's going to be a 6-man. Like, what's the point? But maybe that is just hypocritical, but that's where I was on Mathurin.
That is going to do it for this podcast, everybody. Didn't mean to cut it short, but I ran into internet issues. We had about another 45 minutes to go. Grant and I may try and wrap up later this week. You should have a 3rd episode up at some point. Regardless, I'll figure out how to get one up if me and Grant can't sync up before then. Until next time, though, please remember to rate, review, subscribe. Apple, Spotify. If you're on YouTube, hit that sub button, comment, help the algorithm love us back. Join our Discord. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. You could support the show by buying our merch. That's in the YouTube and podcast description as well. And until next time, and as always, leave you with the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible, the man who would never let my internet collapse at 1:00 in the morning while we're in the middle of a banger podcast, Frank Ntilikina.